Hi, everybody. This is Chris. Al, what time is it, Al?
Chris, it is time for another Readiness Rewired Healthcare Preparedness podcast, and I'm excited on this one, as I am with many and all of our podcasts, really, because it's going to be another great one, I think, today.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think we should remind folks that this episode also will only be featuring two of those three-legged, the three legs of the stool that you've referenced in the past. As Mike is still on assignment and won't be joining us probably till first of the year. We are wishing him well and hope that things are going well. I know he's really busy, and he'll have some stories when he comes back. Whether he can tell those stories and we can share them will be another thing. But let's talk about our guest today and our topic today, Al. What do you got for us?
Yeah, well, today I'm really glad we have Chris Williams as our guest. Chris is an emergency preparedness coordinator with a Midwest hospital that Chris Perrin, you and I have dealt with as well as Mike. You know, the thing, before we talk about the topic, the thing that I'm struggling with all along is, and I struggled with this all the time in the meetings. I'd say, "Hey, Chris," and Chris Williams would look at me, Chris Perrin would look at me, and it's like, I got to be more specific. So, we're going to have to be aware of that today, because usually when we're saying, "Chris, what about this?" we're asking a question to Chris Williams and not Chris Perrin. And I can only say it's a good thing my name is Al, because it's different, But today, and this kind of comes out of a conversation that Chris Williams and I had offline about burnout prevention. And when we were talking about this, and Chris Williams said, burnout preventions and the pressures on emergency preparedness and wearing patients thin. And by patients, it's PATIENCE, not the thing that we all are in it for, at our patient, PATIENT, patient in the hospital. But Chris was talking about our patients wearing thin, but that burnout prevention, when I heard that, I thought, wow, you know what? A lot of emergency preparedness people get into that mode and sometimes try to do too much with too little. And instead of surviving and moving on and learning and growing and being a part of the preparedness efforts, they throw in the towel and call it quits. So, Chris, interesting topic, and let's dive into this burnout prevention and all the things that couple into what causes that, but also how to prevent that.
And let's just frame it a little bit more specifically, that Chris, you're with a large hospital, fairly large hospital, not the biggest one in your state, and you've got some affiliations or loose affiliations as far as a system goes, or is it just the mothership and that's all you're responsible for?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me, guys. I always love kind of being part of these conversations and listening to some of your other podcasts. But yeah, so I work at a 400-ish bed level 3 trauma center here in Eastern Iowa, and we're a standalone facility, not part of any health system. So that also can bring on some unique challenges when it comes to emergency preparedness, as we've seen with derecho level events or COVID. It kind of changes some of those things for preparedness activities. So it can be interesting, and being a standalone with kind of our multiple different pieces out there. As an EP person, you tend to be responsible for a lot of little pieces that maybe are or are not regulatory required. So it gets interesting from an EP standpoint, being as part of a standalone and not necessarily part of a system to fall back on or even get additional guidance from the mothership, as you said. So.
Okay. And you, EP is emergency preparedness, and that's your title. Do you have a title of emergency preparedness, or what is your?
My official title is,
share.
It's Safety and Emergency Management Specialist is my official title. I oversee all of the emergency preparedness functions for the hospital and all of our clinics. as well as I chair our what used to be Environment of Care Committee back when we were Joint Commission. Now that we're DNV, we call it PESCI, the Physical Environment Safety Committee. So I oversee those two big chapters, for our organization. Really, the safety side of things is kind of the day-to-day piece of my job, whereas the emergency preparedness function is, I wouldn't necessarily say like a background function. It certainly rises to the level of forefront when it comes to regulatory requirements and things like that. But there's the day-to-day is different, I will say, from an EP standpoint than it is from the safety standpoint. So, which, like many of my colleagues probably throughout the country, it's very rarely are we just EP designated individuals for our organization. There's usually another hat or seven or 10, that we end up wearing as part of this. So,
And if I can ask another clarifying question, emergency preparedness suggests that, at least to me, that you're getting people and an organization ready for a response, but then do you have an active role in the responses themselves, or is that, you set the table and then other people will actually activate and manage the emergency response at your organization?
that's a great question. For our organization, it changes on occasion. In a traditional response for our organization, my roles tend to switch to safety officer and or maybe liaison officers, kind of depending on the roles, who all's kind of part of that experience as far as the external partnerships. If we've got our local EMA or fire EMS, some of the other first responders, then maybe I serve as more of a liaison role just because of my previous experience in pre-hospital environment as a paramedic. So, it tends to change depending on the type of incident, but for the most part, it's usually safety and or liaison officer is my role once we move into a response piece of this. But my majority function is obviously the mitigation and the preparedness. Hopefully we don't have to get to the response phase in some of these.
Gotcha. And when you mentioned those two roles, the liaison and safety, those are specific roles in incident command system. And so rather than manage the overall incident command or incident management response, you're fulfilling one of those roles that's kind of been predetermined. And that's, yeah. I asked that because we have ongoing conversations, again, offline, about emergency preparedness versus emergency management. And, their definitions and job titles are part of the scope creep, I think, that inevitably impacts workload and some of the challenges that Al's wanting us to address today. So
Yeah, and I
thanks
think,
for the clarification.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about, emergency management, emergency preparedness, kind of having a linear role, but they do differentiate at some point. Kind of same thing when it comes to that incident management portion. And so, I think a lot of my colleagues, and obviously can't speak for all of them, but we tend to take on a little bit different role when it comes to incident management versus emergency management. And so again, it kind of really determines on how big the event is, who all's involved. A lot of times my role will even switch to more of just facilitating incident command, helping guide some of the discussions, so we're maybe not getting too far off course or getting down into the weeds of something that's completely unrelated. So again, that kind of changes a little bit, but facilitation is another big one that we tend to do, especially in organizations that maybe don't necessarily have a ton of emergencies that they respond to. So it's definitely a job of many hats, that's for sure.
It'll be good to see, Al, I just want to finish off on this one, that the new HICS, the Hospital Incident Command System, that I think last was updated in 2014, post-COVID was supposed to get some updates. And I think one of the key updates they saw that might be helpful in organizations that don't use incident command very frequently is another role, and that's just the person that helps manage the process of the incident command startup, incident action planning, and things like that. So it's interesting that you're, practically speaking, fulfilling that, certainly on a smaller scale, and sounds like that they might be officially looking at adopting a position like that will help with facilitating incident command in an actual incident.
Well, and on that topic, I want to circle back to that incident command, because we'll talk with Chris Williams about, he's developing for his leadership, and a lot of new incident command people that come into the organization. And we see that it doesn't matter which hospital you're at, we see that happening. But Chris Williams is working, or has been working, on a command board for incident command to kind of have a basic, make it simple, make it easy, make it quick to understand, so people have their feet on the ground a little bit better. I want to circle back to that, but I want to talk to the listeners also, because back when I was fully employed, one of the things that we all had going on was our Hospital Alliance for Preparedness in Iowa, because we were all in the Iowa group. And, I was chairman of that group, or, sat at and organized the monthly meetings. And when I was retiring, we saw a lot of very good people in our Hospital Alliance group, but they're wearing so many hats, as Chris Williams mentioned, that it's like, wow, who am I gonna get to take this over? Because I took it over from someone else who moved on, and I enjoyed that position for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. And Chris Williams and I were talking, and with a little bit of arm twisting, but not much, because he's very active in what he was doing. He said, "Yeah, I will take that on," and we got him a co-leader, which I think has changed 3 or 4 times since then. But in our organization's turnover, for emergency preparedness, and the light experience level that people come in with, the very freshman level experiences, Chris Williams has kept that Hospital Alliance group in tune and engaged. And I think it's, for the people involved in there, and we have quite a good, or Chris, you can talk about that a little bit more. We have quite a good following of people, and some good interactions when I join the meetings. Chris Perrin, I know you join the meetings once in a while still, and it's some great topics. So thank you. I wanted to say thank you, Chris Williams, for taking that over, because you've done a wonderful job. Before we get on to the command board, anything, to kind of promote Hospital Alliance, the HAPI, we call it the HAPI group, HAPI, because I think it's a powerful, valuable tool that we have over the years developed and fine-tuned and kept going.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, thanks for the kind words, Al. It's pretty easy when, I kind of inherit something that was really, the foundation was already laid by what I consider the 3 wise men, 2 of them already sitting here today, but, the 3 wise men of emergency preparedness, and the HAPI group, the Hospital Alliance for Preparedness in Iowa, really is, it's just another tool in the preparedness toolbox, right? We have our LEPCs, our local emergency planning committees. We have our county emergency management agencies. We have our service area coalitions. We have all these tools and all these pieces. If you're part of a health system, you maybe have your system level EPs to kind of help with some of these things. So HAPI is just another one of those outlets, or another one of those toolboxes for people to use to kind of help. Not necessarily avoid red tape, but just gives you another way of information sharing, resource sharing if it gets to that point. But really, it's just a collaboration of EPs across the state. We have roughly 70-ish members, anywhere from healthcare and hospital emergency managers or emergency preparedness folks. We have regional coalition members. We have emergency management agency partners. We have public health partners. I mean, so it's really a big collaborative group that just helps point us in the direction of healthcare preparedness, helps us carve out that little bit of a niche for us. And with the HAPI group, it's nice being able to bounce things off of each other, because we all collectively have the same issue, right? We all have the the responsibility of emergency preparedness in a healthcare setting, which is going to be different than our first responders, going to be different than our county EMAs. The goals are a little bit different for them than they are for us. And so this really kind of helps bring that group together. We all have the same responsibilities when it comes to drills, right? CMS says you have to do X, Y, and Z. We all have to meet those regardless of who we're using for regulatory purposes, whether it's DNV, Joint Commission, the basics of exercises and drilling and all that stuff remains pretty much the same. And so it allows us to kind of help put some of that stuff together. And that's what I try to use the HAPI platform for, is to take some of the burden off of those people who are wearing 15 hats, where EP is kind of lower on the list for them, or take the burden off of some of those folks who are brand new freshmen when it comes to the emergency preparedness role in a healthcare setting. And one of the ways that we do that is we try to implement things when it comes to like education and trainings. We try to, this year we had CISA's Office of Bombing Prevention come out and do a bomb threat kind of education and training / workshop. Can't quite call it an exercise, but again, it's a common issue that all of us are going to have, right? We all have to have a drill of some sort. Why not all come together and do that drill together instead of relying on each individual organization? Again, it's just trying to help kind of promote some of that collaboration across the state. And it helps with the information sharing capabilities, who can do what, who can't do what, who's doing something different. What's your response look like at Mary Greeley versus what mine looks like at my organization, or any other organization across the state, right? So again, big thing is the communication and collaboration. That's what I love about HAPI.
And that's the key word, Chris. I'm glad you said that, because relying on your partners out there at other hospitals and collaborating and bringing ideas in and, adjusting it to your own organization, but not having to start with a blank piece of paper all the time, is a valuable tool that I hope more and more EP people who are new to our group, not the podcast group, but to the EP group, realize. It says, hey, that's how I'm going to get better, is to reach out to my partners out there and find out what's going on. Ask those questions. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And again, because I know Chris Perrin, Mike, and I were all at your CISA bomb prevention and bomb workshop, if you will. And there's so many great resources out there that are willing to help. Department of Homeland Security and CISA, the cyber, Chris Perrin helped me, the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what great groups are out there ready to help. You just have to realize that you have to reach out, talk to your partners, and get some contacts out there.
So Al, let's circle around. First of all, we need to clarify it. We're not three wise men. We're the three wise guys. That's probably about the most that we can lay claim to. And I think that from a nuts and bolts thing, belonging to your group entails an invitation to usually a monthly meeting. You have a few months where you don't hold that. It's a 2 or 3 hour kind of an organized brainstorming, sharing, problem solving, problem sharing sort of platform. Is that right? That's the main piece. And then you also have kind of built in this opportunity for them to all sign on in a sort of a 28E agreement, where they can provide resources and share with one another. Is that right?
Yeah, so we have essentially a standing agenda every month. We talk about things that are EPI related. Thanks to COVID, it's really kind of on everybody's radar. And COVID obviously isn't the first of its kind. We've seen some other things. This COVID just kind of became a little bit bigger than some of the other ones that have come across our tables. But we discuss everything.
Chris,
yep.
EPI is epidemiological. You mean, or disease oriented, right? When you say EPI.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So just clarifying for those.
We have that on that standing agenda. We talk about flu cases. If there's something new that's kind of coming about that maybe needs to be on our radar from a planning perspective. We talk about drills and exercises. We talk about our hazard and vulnerability assessments, or HVAs. We talk about who's had some events happen and maybe they want to walk us through a little bit of their after action reviews, which we find is huge, especially here in the Midwest, right? Um, because of how spread out we are. We saw earlier this year that there was, tornadoes out in the western part of the state in Greenfield, right, that decimated some of these towns. You had flooding in northwest Iowa that decimated some of these towns and really affected the healthcare capabilities of taking care of patients. And so learning from some of their experiences and how we can handle things here, maybe in our part of the state, really kind of helps align that. And then you talked about that MOU or memorandum of understanding that we have. Really, it's just it is non-contractual in the sense that it's not legally binding. What it does is it provides it provides proof that you're part of a healthcare coalition, right? We all have to show that during our DNV surveys. But more importantly, it helps people fall back on who can I call when there's going to be something that hits the fan, right? And so it helps outline that communication process. Who's available in my area? Who can I talk to that's maybe a couple of counties away that maybe normally my service area doesn't deal with, because maybe you have a piece of specialty or equipment that I need that I can't get in my service area. And so that's really kind of the foundation of the HAPI group, and that's what the MOU is there for. It's just again kind of a, hey guys, I'm willing to put myself out there that if you need something, please call me, and me and my organization will see what we can do to help.
What's the downside of belonging? I mean, there's no costs. There's no, other than a commitment of time. There really isn't anything, is there?
Exactly. It costs you nothing. It's free 99. If you want to come that month, come that month. And again, we push out the meeting minutes for people who aren't able to make that meeting for whatever reason, because again, we realize that the large majority of the people that are in our group, their sole job isn't just emergency preparedness or emergency management, right? Again, these are nurses, these are executive level leaders in some of these positions. So again, this is a hat that's further away from what their primary role is. This is a collateral to a collateral for a lot of these folks. And so by having these meetings, it helps them jump in and try and get a quick snapshot of, okay, what do I need to know this month? What are some of the other organizations seeing out there? So, again, we'll take surveys, for example. If somebody's a DNV accredited organization, and now everyone's kind of running into their cycles, they want to hear what's the newest and greatest thing that surveyors are looking for, right? There's every year tends to be something specific, right? It's workplace violence one year. Next year it might be something different. And so it helps us prepare and get things ready. And especially for those people, again, who wear this hat lower than other hats. It's less that they have to focus on that part, because we kind of spoon feed some of this information to them to be able to get them at least basic level prepared for their organization.
And it would help the new ones, people that are newer to the position and unaware of some of the practical applications, resources, shortcuts. We'll make sure, we usually do a paragraph explanation of this session. I want to make sure that we get a link, either your email. This position that you're filling for HAPI is not a paid position. It's not something that your organization requires of you, but if we can get your email for those people that do want to reach out, we'll include that in the description when this episode gets posted.
Yeah, absolutely. Please reach out. We'd love to have, the more the merrier, right? And it's not necessarily just a numbers game for us. It's really just help us share those experiences that you guys are having across the state. Help us understand some of the things that you're working through, some of the things that maybe we can better plan for. And if you're new to the role, lean on us for some help. There's not a lot of, short of like the FEMA, IAS courses for, 100, 200, 700, kind of the basics that everybody really expects. There's not a ton of healthcare EM driven training. There are some opportunities out there. There's certainly a lot of, there's CHEP and CHECK and all these different things that you can go to. But those are great to get you a certification. But for the person who's wearing this as a collateral, right, they don't necessarily have the time to go learn all of the cool guy stuff when it comes to emergency management. They need a very condensed Barney version of emergency preparedness. And some of those trainings don't exist for these guys. You end up spending 2 or 3 days to try and get some of this education, bring back, and it's overwhelming, right? Again, they're trying to take all that information, cram it in, bring it back to the organization, and then go back to doing their normal, regular job. And so HAPI helps kind of bridge that gap, I think, by just providing those conversations and those experiences and opportunities, and then people can ask questions, and reach out for additional help or further clarification. So yes, please reach out. Absolutely. cwilliams@mercycare.org.
Awesome. And we would not be doing due diligence if we don't also remind people of our previous episode and the Association for Healthcare Emergency Preparedness Professionals, AHAP. Also an organization, a national organization that has now its own certification. I think that certification actually includes a mentorship. So people that enroll in that are given some guidance and support on a longer basis. But that, along with healthcare coalitions, there's a number of resources. I'm not sure you want to go with any one. None of us is as smart as all of us. So if you can bring everybody together and connect to them, that's the super brain.
Yeah, and I'll even say that, Iowa Hospital Association has been great. Just a couple of years ago, they created another work group, ISHPM, or Al always calls them I ship them. But the Iowa Society for Healthcare Preparedness and Emergency Managers is another great platform for a homegrown program right here in the state of Iowa for people to get some of that information, go to the conferences, and again, communication and collaboration is huge with these groups.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So let's circle back around, Chris Williams, because all the emergency preparedness people that I've run into at whatever level of hospital, when they're newer, they want to take on the world and they want to eat that elephant all at once. And I've even talked to people about, I'm going to do an exercise of the month, and it's like, I'd be real careful of that, because if you're planning it and following up on it, it takes a lot more than that to really put some meat on the bone. But we talked about, I'd like to hear more about how the command board in incident command is coming, because again, you like all of us have to bring new people up to speed on incident command, which is a very important piece that we hope not to activate, but when the Schmidt hits the fan, things are going to happen. But sometimes we have a struggle with the interest level, because we're talking executives and it's like, I don't have time for that stuff, or the take it serious. Now, COVID brought a seriousness to incident command that a lot of us had not seen before with our executives. And at my organization, when I was there, I was thoroughly pleased and impressed with the focus and effort, as well as a lot of hospitals around the area, and they really went, oh yeah, this incident command, this emergency preparedness stuff, it's really important. You don't use it every day, but it's really important. But that command board that you talked about, how's that coming, and what's your concept of why you're developing it, and have you implemented it yet?
So the idea behind my command board was, a lot of people are using I think it's the DMAT. It's got the full 76 position board, and they fill that out.
Yeah, the HIC stuff. Yep.
Yeah, but for our organization, we tend to run our incident command just a little bit different. What I would consider a modified HICS, and so one of the driving pieces behind that command board is what I consider the dirty 30. Right? What are the first things you need to do in the first 30 minutes to make sure that we're on the path for success, right? In medicine, we always talk about airway, breathing, circulation, right? Control the major bleeding, airway, breathing, circulation. We want our command teams to kind of think the same things. What are the high priorities for you and your organization to make sure that we're preserving life and property? And so the idea behind the command board is one, it helps avoid some of the confusion. You start getting 13, 15 people into a room, people maybe forget who the incident commander is. So the command board clearly identifies who that incident commander is. It's going to start identifying who maybe some of the key roles are that aren't necessarily um, what I would consider staffed. So, a lot of times like your ops section chief, your planning section chief, those might be very specific people for your organization. Whereas like liaison can be anybody, right? You grab the first arm you grab and you say, hey, I need you to go sit over here at your local EMA and I need you to tell me what they're saying and I'll tell you what we're saying, right? Um, so again, some of those that are, maybe sometimes staffed, but could be literally anybody in the organization. Who's that going to be? What's their contact information? And then the other part of the whiteboard or that command board is identifying the staff space and stuff, right? The idea is that when you're in full blown incident command mode, right, your incident commander is trying to run and drive this bus. And then you start having other people filter in, right? Well, we can't stop this train. It's already on its track and it's already headed down the line, right? So instead of coming in and starting to kind of disrupt the conversation or disrupt the flow of how incident command is running and asking questions that maybe have already been answered, this whiteboard kind of gives you the layout, right? That dirty 30 of what's the issue, right? That command board says, here's who's in charge, here's the issue, here's staff space and stuff, issues or concerns, or things that have already been allocated. And then it has another section that's going to be, who are some of the key external partners that we have involved? Do we have Lynn County EMA involved? Do we have public health involved? Who's our contact at the fire department other than 911? So again, that person who's filtering in maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes in, they don't have to ask, hey, where are we at on this? What have we done? Look at the whiteboard, get yourself caught up with the notes that are on the board, move on, and join the rest of the conversation. So it's coming along nicely. There's a few things we've had to tweak a little bit with some guidance from our chief of operations, but it's not fully implemented. We're getting ready to kind of finalize some of the training and education for our incident command team and the rest of our executives, and then get that pushed out where we'll promote the whiteboard piece or the command board. So it's getting there. It's a project for sure.
What a cool idea to take the HICS, the Hospital Incident Command System, and simplify it and focus. I love the dirty 30. That first 30 minutes. I love that. And you're referencing, because you are clinical and have that paramedic background. You kind of relate. Here's what we do over in the medical world. Well, here's what we want to do in the preparedness or response world in our first 30 minutes. What's the key things? Because you don't need to focus on tomorrow. You need to focus on how do we get our hands wrapped around this. And I love that. When I saw that, you sent me a little picture of your initial thing. I thought, how clever, because we got to keep things simple, because there's stuff coming at people all the time, especially in a disaster.
And I think that's the thing with emergency preparedness, right? You look at, and again, kind of relating it back to emergency medicine, right? We show up to a car accident and we're looking at this gruesome, deformed leg, right? And we get that tunnel vision of that's the injury. Well, maybe that's not the high priority, right? So even in emergency preparedness, a lot of times we'll see that if you don't kind of control that chaos, you start putting the cart before the horse. And it's like, hey, maybe we need to start with the bit and bridle first, right? And that's bringing the incident command back to a manageable piece. Like you said, we can't eat the whole elephant in one sitting. But if we start taking the little bites that are going to help us be a little bit more successful, now we make sure that we're putting all of the pieces there that are going to make this a smoother transition, from response to recovery than trying to backtrack and fix the things that we missed on the first go around.
Yeah, taking the right bites, because even though people like dessert, it probably shouldn't come first.
Sure.
Chris Perrin, anything to add on there? Because I know in your emergency preparedness days, and you're still behind the scenes very active and stuff, you've developed a lot of that stuff. Any comments on the command board, or have you looked at things like that?
I think organizational chart, the Hicks 207 form, that's specifically for healthcare, where they have this chart and the 70 some positions laid out, is a bit overwhelming. And I think I've been in conversations with some critical access hospitals recently, and I know Unity Point is a healthcare system in Iowa that's working on some incident command stuff too. It's right sizing all that stuff that is really, it's out there. It was built by the federal government. The scale at which it was built and the way that the courses teach it is really for interagency use. So you have enough people. If you don't have enough people, you just get more. I mean, there's more people in other agencies. When it's within one agency, to be able to scale something up, to build it out, to use the things that were originally designed for, for these true disasters, for the smaller incidents, even though the literature for FEMA and so on has always said, hey, that's out there and it's scalable. They haven't really done a lot in the concrete world. So I think the command board idea is great. I think in my last years, I used a rolling whiteboard and use that as in a similar fashion as sort of the rolling incident action plan. And at the top, we would put the name of the incident and a brief description. This is the situation. On the right-hand side, we put the organization, the key people in the organization. We put some of the objectives on there, kind of what period we're in terms of length of time. Is this the beginning of an operational period, the end of one? It's good practice, but it was scaling some of those tools. And I think we could have a whole session, and probably will, late winter, early spring, Al, about incident command. But that's a great example of something that's pretty unwieldy and doesn't really fit in the day-to-day just-in-time world of hospitals, whereas it's been mastered and advocated on behalf of public safety, which kind of works under that sort of a mindset day to day, where they've got a command structure, and to suddenly pivot into that, I think, is difficult for most organizations. And this is a great example of sharing what other people are doing and then tweaking. The staff, space, and support concept. I use staff, stuff, space, and systems for ongoing systems and what needs to be adjusted. So we're just right now kind of going through that same sort of dynamic that I think is probably present in your HAPI meetings that you're talking about. And then also we just need to introduce new people that are overwhelmed with, here's FEMA 100, here's FEMA 200, here's FEMA 700, here's a disinterested administration that wants you to make sure we meet regulatory compliance. And the thing that I would probably end this diatribe with is, there's the shelfware. That's the paperwork and stuff that a lot of people are pushed to comply with. And then there's the sweatware. And the sweatware is, how's it really going to work? Or actually, that's the wetware. The sweatware is the practice to get there. But too many are focused on shelfware and not enough on how do we take the administration into an operational mode. So,
well, and Troy said it best back in one of your earlier podcasts. It's emergency preparedness with a checkbox feature has really hampered our ability to push true emergency preparedness in healthcare organizations, right? Because we tend to meet the checkbox pieces of the regulatory requirement. It's like we met that, we're good, right? And that's for a lot of different reasons. And so I think that's, when you talk about earlier, Al, you mentioned, everyone's kind of young and hungry and they want to hit that ground running. Everyone's trying to put their little bit of flair on it, right? You want to take that project and somehow make it your own. You don't want to just stick with the status quo, typically, right? And I think that's when you get that young and hungry EP person, whether it's their primary role or it's a collateral or it's a collateral to a collateral, they want to own some sort of piece of that. And when you start running into the some of the roadblocks, I will call them, it's pretty easy for them to get dissuaded to want to continue on down that pathway. And I think that tends to lean into a little bit of burnout for the role. Whether it's them moving on to a different emergency preparedness function in another organization or completely different, or it's that maybe they're a nurse and an EP, and now they've taken a position as a different nurse in a different department, or maybe moved up to a manager spot. And now they have to give up the EP function, whatever that looks like, right? You don't see a lot of people in this role for great lengths of time, for a lot of different reasons. And I think that's going to be part of the challenge with healthcare emergency preparedness, is that turnover piece.
So back to the original, kind of topic subject, burnout prevention. Chris, talk about how are you addressing burnout prevention with you? Because I know the challenge, you and I have talked about, they pile on tasks onto the emergency preparedness person. You say sometimes you should be a collaborator, but not an owner, and I like that statement that you made before when you and I had that off-camera conversation. But you want to try to line up things to be more self-sufficient, and yet then the media, all the things happening in the world, some executive, senior leader gets and says, "Hey, we should be focusing on this," and it's like, well, not really, but I guess you're the boss, So they throw it, and where are they going to throw it? Well, let's have the EP person do it because I'm not sure what they're doing, and they've got a lot of time, and it's not really necessarily, but causing burnout. What are you seeing on that, and how are you addressing it to keep Chris Williams fresh and moving forward?
So first and foremost, I think the biggest thing that we can do is advocate for ourselves. We have to learn to say no. We become the dumping ground for everything, right? You can loosely dotted line everything within our organizations and everything we do from a business standpoint to emergency management, emergency preparedness. For example, when I first got to my organization, I owned the pet visitation policy. And I'm not sure why, right? And so one of my very first things was challenging that. Like, why do I sat down and went through every policy that was owned by emergency management. And I said, why? Why do I own this? And how does it relate directly to emergency management? And I started looking at like the pet visitation policy. I'm like, well, this says that, we can't tell people, no, you can't bring this animal in. You can only have these types of animals in. And if you're ever going to say no, you have to ask legal first. And so again, it's, I don't own this. I need to put this in the right place. And I think for emergency preparedness folks and emergency management folks, whatever your title is for your organization, I think that's the biggest thing. Sometimes you just have to say no. You have to step back and say, what actually applies to emergency management here? And I'll even take the HVA, for example. I used to score things for elopement, some of the workplace violence stuff that was lower level than, say, active threat or active shooter. And after talking with some of my colleagues in HAPI, I started realizing, well, that's a security vulnerability assessment, right? Like, if somebody elopes from the hospital, that's not necessarily an emergency management function. Sure, if it's cold outside, -30, something like that, that's a problem. But that's a security problem, right? A security related incident, not an emergency management function. And so to keep ourselves from burnout, again, you start with the owning your own process and knowing what you can and cannot do, limitations. You have to set those limitations, but you really have to work closely with your administration. We have to build that bridge a little bit better to where it's not just oh, hey, EM's got to do their stuff. We'll check it off. We'll get it done. Good to go, right? We really have to include them in a lot of our drill planning. Your organization is probably setting up their strategic goals for the year, for the fiscal year, however they run their stuff. And maybe some of those goals are related to your function in emergency preparedness. Maybe it's they want to focus on downtime. Maybe they want to focus on active shooter. Maybe they want to focus on cybersecurity stuff. And so incorporating that into your drill planning schedules and into your drill cycles, if you can plan on that ahead of time, then you don't have to try and cram that in on the back end after you already planned a year's worth of drills. And so, leaning on my HAPI friends, leaning on ISHBM friends, leaning on folks I've met out at University of Nebraska. I just recently attended two different exercise planning and development courses through UNMC. And it was great information, even for the seasoned professional. It was nice to bring it back and learn a few of those little pieces that maybe you've forgotten along the way, or just how to do it better, or how to do it differently. Again, talking with the different counterparts that were there. We had folks who were from utility companies that were there. They weren't even all healthcare. Again, kind of understanding what our role is in the organization is really key. You get there, you hit the ground running, and then you slowly kind of get ground to a halt because you're like, wait a minute, step back for a second, learn your role, learn your trade, and understand how that fits in the overall organization's mindset and climate when it comes to emergency preparedness, because you will quickly find yourself jaded, I think, in some instances when you're really trying to push, and realize that all you're hitting is a brick wall and there's not going to be a whole lot of give there. And I think the other piece to kind of keep myself sane and keep myself from getting overly burned out is sharing it. Lean on some of your planning committees, develop a drill planning committee, and help them share some of that responsibility, whether it's helping you come up with the exercises, helping you come up with a schedule, helping you put volunteers together, whatever that looks like. Don't own the whole process by yourself, because it's just too big. Even if you're critical access facility, if you try to own that whole process, at some point you're just going to be like, enough's enough. And take all the training opportunities. The more I get out of my world and go to a training environment, or I go to a conference, or I go to some other committee meeting that I've never been a part of, it breaks up some of that monotony that you build up. And it helps, again, kind of open your eyes, like, okay, I'm not the only one that's running into this issue. This is maybe a little bit bigger thing that's maybe across the industry, right? That might be the issue. So it's really a lot of different things you can do to prevent that burnout, but it's a real thing. A lot of people just don't want to do it for very long for a lot of different reasons. There's no extra money in doing emergency preparedness. A lot of people don't get healthcare funding. If you do, it's pretty minimal, and so you're still trying to put together a solid EP program, and you're trying to do all these cool, fun things. You see the drills on TV, you want to do those, and you realize you've got $80 in your budget to do it. Probably gonna have to scale that back some.
Awesome. Thank you for those comments and bringing it full circle around to that burnout prevention, because I hope a lot of our listeners, and even listeners that aren't necessarily focused on emergency preparedness, but it applies to a lot of other positions, a lot of other responsibilities and duties that they're doing, can take that and now kind of put it in their own world and massage it a little bit and make it work for them. So great comments. I love your comment as we kind of wrap things up, and Chris Perrin and I will kind of be ending here real quick, but stay alive, keep learning, stay active, and don't go into that zombie effect. But you're doing a great job, and hopefully those words of wisdom coming from another wise guy, or whatever you want to call it,
we have an opening.
Will help. Yeah,
we have an opening for the fourth leg. I kind of coming full circle and maybe saying the same thing in a different way. I think that our industry still lacks clarity because it's become an ad hoc kind of a basket where they're throwing a lot of things: business continuity and security, safety, workplace violence. Because we're not very well defined, we were disasters, right? And now it's incidents. Well, what is an incident? And people use the word incident. They even use incident command in other areas, like with your IT folks and with your quality management folks. So I think one of the things that we need to work hard on is clarity and definitions. We probably need to come to terms with some definitions that give people, when they have this job, a little bit more clarity and the ability to say no, because that's not part of this description. And I think the other part that again, collaboration is part of, is working smarter, not necessarily harder. And that is, when people say, well, what are we going to exercise this year? It's, well, what is in our HVA? And we did this hazard vulnerability analysis and we have priorities. Let's put those in. And then when we look at, definitions for exercises versus drills, people say, we want to do exercises, we want to do more of them, and those are a lot of work. Say, well, let's do a drill. We're going to exercise part of the big picture. We're going to do mass communications. We're going to focus on that, or we're going to focus on maybe definitions and making sure our people are using the right words, both administratively but also operationally. Lockdown, for example, we've talked about this on different podcasts. Lockdown might mean different things to outsiders or visitors or people in law enforcement versus what we use that term for. So I think if we add some clarity to our language, we really, and some definitions, and a lot of that comes in brainstorming and in the larger meetings that we have, where we have peers in other disciplines. They may have different definitions, and we need to maybe come together with that. So I think lots of food for thought on this one, and I think that there's light that we can see in Mr. Williams, because he's embracing and advocating for that kind of clarity and that sort of direction, and both by example and then also by hosting meetings. So I think this has been a good session. Al, anything else?
I think the last thing,
I was just going to say, Chris Williams, any final thoughts? Because that's where we want to kind of end things up. So please, sorry for the interruption, and take it away.
That's, if I have one kind of last little, pearl of wisdom for everybody, it's, remember, you're not alone in this. There's plenty of people that are required to drill and do exercises and focus on emergency preparedness. You've got schools, you've got airports, your local emergency management folks already have to meet certain requirements. Your local public health, jump on board, reach out and touch base with those folks and figure out what they're doing for drills and things like that. So you don't have to plan this by yourself. There's always somebody drilling. You might as well jump on that drill cycle with them.
Amen.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
Yep. Chris Perrin, want to wrap this thing up? I'm excited. It's been a great session, and I knew when Chris Williams and I talked, maybe Chris, couple 3 months ago, and we were talking about this and bringing up burnout prevention and emergency preparedness. I thought, wow, what a great topic to bring to other people, to just hear three guys sitting here just kind of chit-chatting and going through some thoughts,
Yep, I appreciate that. I think we're going to have a future session with Chris Williams, as he hosted a bomb threat response exercise, I should say. It wasn't how to deliver a bomb threat, but how to respond to those threats once you receive them. And he hosted a really interesting exercise that we were able to watch last fall. And I think we want to visit with him and see what's going on with both what the work he's doing, but also some of his partners in crime. So definitely looking forward to it. Al, I think there's usually something that Mike finishes up with. Do you have?
Yeah, I probably won't do as good of a job. Mike does such a nice job as our third leg of the three-legged stool. But just remind everybody, if you want to reach out to us, we are readiness.rewired@gmail.com. Go out and listen to our YouTube podcasts. Subscribe. It's free. Ring that bell. Give us that thumbs up if you think we're good. If you think we suck, give us a thumbs down. We want to know if we're hitting the mark on just bringing some information to people to share and help them grow.
So once again, thank you, Al. Thanks, Chris Williams and Mike. We're looking forward to having you join us again here soon. Everybody stay safe, and you'll be hearing from Readiness Rewired soon.